On December 8th, 1980, a crazed fan asked John Lennon for his autograph in New York City. Just hours later, this same fan would fire 4 hollow point bullets into John Lennon's back, killing him instantly. Welcome back to my channel, everybody, and today's video you might hear a little noise in the background. If you hear licking, it is my cat who is sitting on my bed, and if you hear baby crying, it's my niece downstairs giving her mom a howl. So today's video, as you can tell by the intro, is about John Lennon and his subsequent murder in the 1980s. I've had this case on my to-do list for a while now, and I was like, you know what, we're just gonna do it. So I wrote it all on my MacBook. I'm going to be looking at my MacBook from time to time. And this case took a good week for me to write down. I originally started writing on paper, but every time I write, with a pen, and I put my pinky, it hurts. So I have to stick it out when I write. And I was just getting tired of sticking my pinky out when I write. Also, this is the last time you guys will see me with long hair in a video. Tomorrow I go to get my hair cut. John Winston Lennon was born on October 9th, 1940 in Liverpool during a German air raid during World War II. So at the age of 4, his parents separated, but he ended up living with his Aunt Mimi, that's what her name was, and his father was never really in the picture. His father just never really cared for him, but his mother, Julia, did. She made sure that though she was remarried, she made sure she visited John. She was like, I want to be in your life. And not only that, she taught John how to play the banjo, taught him how to play the piano, and she even bought him his first guitar. Sadly, his mother passed away from a car accident in 1958. So as a child and into his adolescence and young adult years, John was a prankster. He pranked almost everybody, and he even liked drawing grotesque pictures on everything. But I think that's mostly what young men and boys do. So in the 1950s, Elvis Presley took the world by storm when he stepped into the music scene. Elvis, however, inspired John Lennon, who was then 16 years old, to start his own band, and he did. And he named the band the Quarrymen. It was named after his school. So John met Paul McCartney on July 6th, 1957 at a church event. So these two would later go on to have one of the most successful songwriting partnerships ever in musical history. So very quickly after getting to know each other, John asked Paul to join his band. Paul quickly agreed, and they would go on to form the band. A year after joining the band, Paul introduced George Harrison to John. George and a college buddy of his, Stuart Sutcliffe, also joined the band. And the only thing they needed now was a drummer. So they gathered the help from Pete Best in 1960. So the first recording that the Quarrymen ever did was Buddy Holly's That'll Be the Day in 1958. Ironically, it was Buddy Holly's band, the Crickets, that made the band change their name. Though later on, John would make kind of a remark saying that he had a vision or a dream of a man standing on a flaming pie and said onto the band, from this day forward, or from this day on, you are Beatles with an A. Honestly, my entire life I thought the Beatles, the bug, was spelled like the band's name because I just didn't know the difference. So in 1961, the Beatles were discovered by Brian Epstein. They had been performing at Liverpool's Cavern Club. They performed there regularly, so it was just normal for them to be there. And Brian discovered them, and he got them a record deal with EMI. They also got a new drummer, who is famously known by his stage name, Ringo Starr. His actual name is Richard Starkey, and they have a producer, George Martin. The group released their first single, Love Me Do, in October of 1961. The single peaked on the British charts at number 17, and the Beatles would go on to be one of Britain's best and most popular bands in this time. In August of 1962, a year after releasing their first single and forming the band and getting a record label, John married his first wife, Cynthia Powell. These two would go on to have one son together who was named after John's mother. His name is Julian. And Cynthia was forced to keep a very low profile during her marriage to John, especially during the Beatlemania. These two would actually later go on to get divorced, and a year after their divorce in 1969, John Lennon married Yoko Ono. In 1964, the Beatles became the first British band to make their way into the United States, like the American music scene, with their appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show. That would launch them into what would become Beatlemania. Also, the Beatles being launched into this, being the first British band to kind of come into the United States, also helped other bands such as the Rolling Stones, and there are a couple other bands. So, in June of 1965, Queen Elizabeth II announced that the Beatles would be a member of the Order of the British Empire. In August of that same year, the band performed to 55,600 fans at the New York Shea Stadium, which would go on to set a record for the largest concert audience in musical history. So, after the Beatlemania in America, they went back to England and they recorded their breakthrough album, Rubber Soul. I have personally never heard Rubber Soul, so maybe I will before I film and edit this video. So yeah, the craze of the Beatlemania started to die down in 1966, and the Beatles even gave up touring in August of 1966. So the Beatles took a very extended break, and when they came back, they wanted to try some experimental sound with drug-influenced exotic instrumental lyrics. When I read that, I was very confused as well, so don't worry. The first sample of the sound was Penny Lane, Strawberry Fields Forever, and it was also followed by the album Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The Beatles immediately suffered, I think, a year after their Beatlemania started to fade. So in 1967, the man who discovered them, Brian Epstein, died of an accidental overdose of sleeping pills. So, shaken by his death, the band would turn to Paul McCartney and ask him to lead them. Paul, in turn, did lead them, and they filmed Magical Mystery Tour. And this was very panned by critics. Critics did not like it. And it also holds one of the band's most cryptic works, and that is I Am the Walrus, which was wrote by John Lennon. So Magical Mystery Tour failed to achieve any commercial success. Like, it did not do anything for them. So this caused the whole band, to go to India for a couple months in the early months of 1968. So their next efforts into basically an effort of being a band without Brian Epstein was Apple Corps Ltd. This, as well, did not work. It was mismanaged. It just didn't work out. So that July, the Beatles faced what would probably be their last hysterical fan crowd at the premiere of their movie Yellow Submarine. Told you, you'd hear a baby cry. In November 1968, the Beatles album, The White Album, or most commonly known, The Beatles, displayed their divergent directions. This album showed that the band wanted to go different directions for each member. So by this time, John's partnership with his now wife Yoko Ono was causing serious tensions within the band, and it wasn't working out for the band. So John and Yoko invented a form of peace by staying in bed while being filmed and interviewed. Their single Give Peace a Chance, released in 1969, and was recorded under the name the Plastic Ono Band. So John left the Beatles in September of 1969, just after the band completed Abbey Road. So the news of him leaving the band was kept a secret until Paul McCartney announced his leave of the band in April of 1970, a month before Let It Be was released. Not long after the Beatles broke up, John released his solo debut album, John Lennon or Plastic Ono Band, which was basically his title album. This album featured a raw and minimalistic sound. It was very different than what the Beatles had shown. And he followed his first album with 1971's Imagine, which is probably one of his biggest albums to date. I know of it. I've never listened to it. Maybe I should listen to it before I move on and edit this video. And this was the most successful and critically acclaimed album that he had made since leaving the Beatles, like I just said. So the title track was later named number 3 on Rolling Stone's all-time best songs list. That's pretty damn good, considering that he was a part of the Beatles. So, however, peace and love were not the only things mentioned on the Imagine album. Since breaking up from the Beatles, Paul McCartney had released a couple songs that kind of, in a sense, what we would call today, dissed John Lennon indiscreetly. Like, he just kind of said something in a song that John Lennon would understand. John Lennon wrote a song called How Do You Sleep, basically calling Paul McCartney out and just kind of talking about it. The two of them, Paul and John, later did reconcile. They kind of just buried the whole thing that they had between them, but they never did formally work together again. They didn't work as like a songwriting duo ever again. So John and Yoko moved from Britain to the United States in 1971, but they were constantly threatened with deportation by the Nixon administration. The President of the United States, his administration was trying to kick out one of the most popular members of a boy band ever because of John's conviction of marijuana in 1968 in Britain. That's in a whole different country. But John, he did not agree with that. John was like, that is not why I'm being kicked out. Like, you don't like the fact that I'm protesting. So John believed it was because of his protesting against the Vietnam War, which a lot of people were doing in the 1970s because of the Vietnam War. If you've never heard of the Vietnam War, people did not agree with the Vietnam War at all. And the 70s is a really good take on that because the hippies, is what they called them, didn't agree with that. Peace and love. That's what they wanted. So, funny enough, John was right. Because when Nixon resigned from office, 2 years later, John was given full residency to the United States of America. Oh my gosh. So, in 1972, while he was still battling the whole deportation thing, him and Yoko, they were having some struggles. Like, he was having some struggles, and they separated in 1973. So, John went to Los Angeles, California, and did what any separated man would do, and he partied and got a mistress. And her name was May Pang. He still was managing to release hit albums. This included Mind Games, which was released in 1973, Wall and Bridges, released in 1974, and Rock and Roll, released in 1975. During this time, John collaborated with David Bowie and Elton John, some of the biggest names in music history. So almost a year after they separated, John and Yoko ended up reconciling, they got back together, and they had one son. It would be their only child together, and his name is Sean. And he was born on John's 35th birthday. Shortly after having his son, his second son, he decided to leave the music business to focus on being a father and being a husband. He wanted to do that. So in 1980, John Lennon returned to the music world with the album Double Fantasy, featuring the hit single just like starting over. But a short time after the album's release, Mark David Chapman shot John several times in the back, killing him instantly in front of John's New York City apartment. John Lennon died at New York City's Roosevelt Hospital on December 8th of 1980, and he was only 40 years old. And if you think about it, his son, his younger son, was only 5 years old when his dad passed away. That's kind of sad. Like, he was only 40 years old, and all he wanted to do was promote peace and all of that, and somebody killed him in such a violent way. Kind of a weird butterfly effect right there. So after his death, John Lennon was actually posthumously inducted into the Songwriters Hall of Fame 7 years after his death in 1987. And then he was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1994. So yeah, that is the story of John Lennon and whatnot. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and if you did, please give it a thumbs up. Remember, guys, I don't think I've said this in a video. If you go to my profile on my banner, there is a Google Forms that you can fill out with case recommendations. I will be checking it. Please do. That'd be great for me. Don't worry, guys. I have a lot of videos coming out. I have a lot of video ideas I need to film. I need to edit a video today. I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.